Let's talk about what it means for a contract to be definite and clear. Imagine you're trying to follow a recipe, but instead of add 2 cups of flour, it says add some flour, maybe. You'd be lost, right? Well, that's exactly what we're trying to avoid in contracts. For a contract to be binding, that means legally enforceable, its terms need to be as clear as a bell on a crisp winter morning. We're talking crystal clear, no room for interpretation, every I dotted and every T crossed. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you've got essential terms that aren't agreed upon, guess what? You don't have a binding contract. All you've got is an intention to negotiate in the future. It's like showing up to a potluck dinner with a bag of groceries instead of a finished dish. You've got the ingredients, but you haven't actually made anything yet. Let me give you an example. Say you're selling your house, and you and the buyer agree on the price. Great start. But then you leave the closing date up in the air. Maybe you say something like, "Oh, we'll close sometime in the summer." Well, that's about as clear as mud. Is it June 1st? August 31st? Without a specific date, you might not have a valid contract at all. Next is the concept of a lawful object in contracts. So, what exactly do we mean by a lawful object? Well, it's pretty straightforward. A lawful object in a contract means that whatever the contract is about, it has to comply with the law. It's as simple as that. But let's break it down a bit further. You see, contracts are these binding agreements we make, right? But here's the thing, they're only enforceable if they're dealing with legal stuff. If a contract involves anything illegal, or if it goes against public policy, or if it's just morally not okay, well, that contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. It's unenforceable. Now, I know what you're thinking. Give me some examples. Well, I've got a few good ones for you. Let's start with criminal activity. Imagine this scenario, you're looking to buy a property, and during the viewing, you stumble upon an illegal cannabis operation right there on the premises. Now, if you were to make an offer on that property that included keeping the operation running, guess what? That contract would be void from the get-go. Why? Because it's involving an illegal activity. It doesn't matter how much money might be involved, if it's illegal, it's a no-go. Here's another one for you, price fixing. Let's say you're a property owner, and you get together with a bunch of other landlords in the area. You all decide, hey, let's set a minimum rent price that we'll all stick to. Sounds like a great idea for the landlords, right? Well, not so fast. That's actually illegal under the Competition Act. Any contract or agreement related to that price-fixing scheme. Yep, you guessed it, is void. And here's one more example that might hit close to home, tax evasion. Picture this, a buyer and seller are working out a deal on a property. They decide to get a bit creative with the numbers. They agree to put a lower price on the official sale documents to reduce those pesky land transfer taxes, and then the buyer will slip the seller some extra cash on the side to make up the difference. This is fraud, plain and simple. And any contract involved in this kind of scheme. You got it, void. Last one is genuine intention. Now, when we talk about genuine intention, we are essentially saying that both parties entering into a contract need to be on the same page, acting of their own free will. Sounds simple, right? Well, not so fast. There are a few sneaky factors that can throw a wrench in the works and make a contract lose its genuine intention. We're talking about mistakes, misrepresentations, duress, and undue influence. Let's break these down one by one. First up, we've got mistakes. We're talking about specific errors that can really impact whether a contract is valid or not. We've got 3 types of mistakes to keep in mind. First, common mistakes. This is when both parties share the same incorrect assumption. Imagine you're selling a property and both you and the buyer believe there's a right-of-way included, but it turns out that right-of-way doesn't actually exist. Second, mutual mistakes. This is when the parties misunderstand each other, leading to what we call cross-purposes. It's like you're speaking English and they're speaking Klingon. You think you're on the same page, but you're really not. Third, unilateral mistakes. This is when one party is mistaken about something fundamental, and the other party either knows about the mistake or is clueless. For example, a buyer might think a lot is bigger than it actually is, and the seller knows the truth but keeps mum. Now, let's move on to misrepresentations. This is where things can get a bit dicey. We've got 3 types to watch out for. First, innocent misrepresentation. This is when someone makes a false statement, but they genuinely believe it's true. For instance, a seller might tell a buyer that the local school serves grades K-8, when it actually only goes up to grade 4. If the buyer relies on this information and signs the contract, they might be able to back out when they discover the truth. Second, fraudulent misrepresentation. This is the big bad wolf of misrepresentations. It's when someone knowingly makes a false statement to trick someone into a contract. Like if a seller swears up and down that the basement never leaks, knowing full well it turns into a swimming pool every time it rains. If the buyer finds out, they could sue for fraud. Third, negligent misrepresentation. This is when someone makes a false statement without bothering to check if it's true. Think of a real estate agent casually mentioning zoning laws without actually verifying them. If a buyer makes a purchase based on this wrong information, they could sue for negligence. Now, let's talk about duress and undue influence. This is when someone uses their power or influence to pressure someone into a contract. It's like your pushy Uncle Bob convincing your sweet, naive Aunt Mildred to sell her house for way under market value. If Aunt Mildred can prove she was under duress, she might be able to get out of the contract. And let's not forget about the failure to disclose material latent defects. If you know there's a mold infestation hiding in the attic, you've got to spill the beans. Keeping quiet about something that could make the property dangerous or uninhabitable can invalidate the contract faster than you can say black mold. Remember, it must disclose this to the buyer.